Welcome to Less Than 12 Parsecs, the fastest Star Wars podcast in the galaxy. Now here's your host, Tim McMahon.
Don't be too proud of this technological terror you've constructed. The ability to destroy a planet is insignificant next to the power of the Force.
Hey, it's Tim. My 5 days of top 5 lists continue. Yeah, here we go, day 2. So, not too long ago on an episode of Less Than 12 Parsecs, while I was suffering from a pretty bad headache, I stated that I sincerely wish that Bacta, that fictional miracle solved from the Star Wars universe, was a real thing in the real world. This comment led me to quip something along the lines of, hey, you know what? The top 5 technologies from that galaxy far, far away that we could really use here in the real world? You know what? That would make a pretty good episode of Less Than 12 Parsecs. So, guess what? I was onto something, and that's what we're gonna do today. So here we go, the top 5 technologies from that galaxy far, far away that we could really use here in the real world today. Now, before I begin, I have to say I have put a few limitations on myself for this list. While it would be cool to have personal spaceships and hyperdrives in our world, what this list is things we could really use here on Earth right now for real. And while space travel is cool, and while I do wish we had it now, the way it's seen in the films, I'm going to stick with more practical applications of these fictional technologies. Got it? Any questions? Good. Oh yeah, and before we begin, I am leaving Bacta off the list since I mentioned it before, and because, you know what, it's just so darn obvious. Alright, here we go.
Number 1.
Lightsabers. Now you're probably saying, well, Tim, you're just being silly with that choice. And you're probably asking what real-world applications could a lightsaber possibly have, other than to cause way too many lost limbs and other dismemberments here. Well, what I'm doing is I'm picturing the tech behind a lightsaber. The blade. A blade that can cut through nearly anything. Imagine all the things we could do with a tool like that. In manufacturing, in construction, in the processing of metals, or anything. Heck, I can even imagine a tiny little lightsaber being used by doctors. You know, a scalpel that cauterizes as it cuts. And if you're saying, but Tim, lightsabers were never that small. Well, to you I would say, you know, in Legends, I think even in the very first novel, Splinters of the Mind's Eye, it was stated that lightsaber blades could be adjusted in their length. They could be shortened or lengthened. So with that in mind, imagine, if you will, let's say, instead of a chainsaw, lumberjacks with lightsabers. Think of all the uses artists and sculptors could come up with lightsabers. Imagine firefighters using lightsabers instead of the jaws of life to rescue people in accidents. See, the blade of the Jedi would make a pretty darn cool tool in our world. But be careful, if you have a Swiss Army lightsaber in your pocket, you could really seriously hurt yourself. So, you've been warned.
Number 2.
Anti-gravity vehicles. Like land speeders. How are the roads in your area? Full of potholes, cracks, and constantly in need of costly repairs? Well, with floating cars and trucks, there would be so much less wear and tear on our streets, boulevards, and highways, since they wouldn't have heavy loads bouncing along them every day. This would free up so much of our tax money to be put to better uses like education, healthcare, and municipal Wi-Fi. Heck, with floating vehicles, would we really need roads? I mean, why tar over the land? Why not just have strips of grass and small shrubs instead? I'm sure this would be way better than the heat-absorbing, non-water-absorbing tar and concrete that we cover our avenues with today. There would be just so many ecological benefits to the world without all the hard roads we use today. Hey, plus, floating speeders would just be so much cooler to drive. Come on, who here wouldn't take a land speeder over the jalopy you're currently driving? I know I would.
Number 3.
Holograms. While I do think these would be cool as a mode of communication or for maps, you know, the way we see them used in the franchise, I would love to see them used in the real world as a form of entertainment. In fact, the old expanded universe often spoke of holodramas. In fact, Wedge Antilles, his sister Sayal, was a galactically famous holodrama actress. Yeah, it's true, look it up on Wikipedia. And ever since I've read about holodramas, I've wondered how they would work. What would they be like? I mean, like, take film, for example. In a film, the placement and movement of a camera is a big part of the art of filmmaking. But in a holodrama, not only does the director have to worry about the camera's location, but they also have to take into consideration how the viewer is placed in relation to the hologram. Because of this, part of me thinks the idea of a holodrama sounds cooler than it actually would be. I don't know, unless maybe the holodrama is projected onto a stage, so watching a holodrama would be like going to a play, but with way better special effects than anything on Broadway. I mean, the spinning stage in Hamilton's pretty cool, but think of the possibilities. Mixing a stage show with a blockbuster's special effects, that would be pretty neat. But then, when it comes to the home release, how does that work? I mean, do homes have little stages in their living rooms instead of TV screens like we do now? Again, I'm not sure how this would work, but I'm intrigued, and I wish we had this tech here on Earth so we could figure it all out.
Number 4.
Macro binoculars. Sure, we have binoculars in our world, but I always love that little readout on the viewfinder, and I always assumed it tells you the distance between you and what you're looking at. Imagine if you could combine that with, say, I don't know, a link to Wikipedia, so that the macro binocular tells you what you're looking at, not just the distance. That'd be pretty cool. I mean, there'd be no more fights among birders. I tell you, that was a crested-throater hornswaggler. No, sir, that was a bloated-beak finchwinger. Instead, you'd look and you'd know. Pretty cool, huh? And speaking of macro binoculars, I have to go off on a tangent here. It's something that's always bugged me about A New Hope. You know that scene where Luke discovers that R2-D2 has run away, and so he and 3PO rush out of the garage, and Luke scans the horizon with his macro binoculars? What Luke does is he stands in one place and he does a complete 360 from where he's standing. But, the dome of the Lars homestead blocks a big part of the horizon, and Luke never looks around the back of the dome. So in my headcanon, R2 is actually just yards away from Luke and 3PO, hiding on the other side of the dome, waiting for them to leave so he can begin his journey. Rewatch this scene and tell me you don't see Luke's era. Once you see it, you'll never unsee it, I promise you.
Number 5.
And finally, the last bit of Star Wars tech I wish we had here in the real world is jetpacks. Yeah, jetpacks. We've been promised jetpacks since the 1960s with the Jetsons and Thunderball, the James Bond movie. And heck, there was even a guy who jetted into the very first Super Bowl. Yeah, look it up on YouTube. But have we all received our jetpacks yet? Nope, no sirree Bob. Now the Mandos though, the Mandalorians, they have working jetpacks, and I want one. From Boba Fett in Return of the Jedi to his Big Daddy Jango in Attack of the Clones, to all the Mandos we saw in the Clone Wars and in Rebels, they all have kick-ass jetpacks. I want my own jetpack, darn it! Now come on, science, hurry up and catch up to the brain of George Lucas and 1,000 other sci-fi authors, will ya? Thanks. Alright, there you go, my top 5 technologies from that galaxy far, far away that I really wish we had here in the real world now. What sort of tech would you like to have in the real world that comes from that galaxy far, far away? I want to know. Email me at 12parsecs.podcast@gmail.com or connect with me on any of my social media accounts. All the links can be found on my website, 12parsecs.podcast.com. Thanks for listening. Houdini!
How could I be so stupid? He's nowhere in sight. Blasted.
Pardon me, sir, but couldn't we go after him?
It's too dangerous with all the sand people around. We'll have to wait until morning.
You've been listening to Less Than 12 Parsecs, the fastest Star Wars podcast in the galaxy. For links and show notes, visit our website, 12parsecsPodcast.com. Follow Less Than 12 Parsecs on Twitter at 12parpod, on Instagram at 12parsecs.podcast, on Tumblr at 12parsecs.podcast, and find us on Facebook as well. And please let us know what you think. Email us at 12parsecs.podcast@gmail.com. All Star Wars sounds, music, images, logos, designs, characters, and elements are registered trademarks and copyright of Disney, Lucasfilm Limited, and their subsidiaries and respected rights holders, and used by Less Than 12 Parsecs Podcast under Fair Use Doctrine. All original content is copyright Tim McMahon and Less Than 12 Parsecs Podcast, released under the No Derivative Works Creative Commons license.